I just want to pick up from what Mohammed just said about why the government didn't use social networking. They seem to be behind the curve. And what we did see was the Vice President and various other government officials. Some have talk condescendingly to the public, especially to the younger generation, by saying you should go home, you shouldn't be so bad, you should listen to your parents, and actually appealing to parents as well in a very, you might say, old-fashioned way. They really didn't have a handle certainly from a third party looking in.
Well, you know, I mean, I think to what Mohammed said about these tools, I think there's a really good point here about the internet being shut down, which is to say that, you know, these tools being available also allows the government a way to look in on people, to spy on what they're doing. And, you know, we see right now with Syria unblocking Facebook, there's always that risk that, you know, that the government could also be using it to monitor the activities of people online.
Can I ask Courtney the same as well? Sorry, Courtney. I mean, you were listening, obviously, to that. And I was just wondering how you gauge the way the government reacted and the way that some have described it as talking very condescendingly to the younger generation of Egypt and the demonstrations that we saw.
Well, I think it's par for the course. I mean, I think it's been surprising at how unsophisticated the Egyptian government has been in using any sort of online media. You see very few NDP blogs. You don't see a big presence on Facebook or in Twitter trying to control the debate. So they've pretty much allowed Egyptian civil society and really pro-democracy, anti-Mubarak voices to dominate the blogosphere and the social media realm. So I think that's pretty interesting. Unlike, for example, in Sudan, where you had the government create faux Facebook pages to try to entrap protesters. But I think that the Egyptian government is not going to get anywhere by talking down to these activists, because they have been engaged for several years in trying to bring change to their countries. And social media, it is helping them amplify their voice. It's helping their voice stand out among, you know, the millions of others, and it's helping amplify it to the Western media and to Western politicians, which, let's be clear, it does have an impact on Egypt. You know, as Obama is changing his support for Mubarak and becoming a little bit less convinced, this is going to have an impact. So I don't think we should discount the role that these media have in amplifying the voices of some of these activists.
Well, let me bring Omar Fendem here. You know, you said just a few moments ago, Omar, that, you know, you were speaking to people on the ground, you were speaking to colleagues and friends around the world, and you know the culture. So, I mean, what was the reaction from you when you saw government officials talking in a condescending fashion and using the traditional media outlets to get their message across?
I mean, I wasn't surprised, you know. It was sad to see, but I wasn't surprised at all, you know. And that is just really what I think most people of Egypt probably expected to hear as well, you know, at least the people who were involved in these protests. And just wanted to make a point that it is also sad. I think we briefly talked about Tamer Hosni earlier, you know. I think the truth is, like, some of the government tactics have worked, and they have kind of created a little bit more fear in some of the people, but the resolve, I'm not a huge fan of his music, I must say, but the resolve of the Egyptian people to push through that is what ultimately is gonna make this happen, I think. Sorry, thank you for not playing that anymore. That was kind of getting really hard to think there for a second. But it's also, just with respect to him, I mean, you know, he's a human being, he's a man, he could make his own decisions. For him to come out and say that really was unfortunate. I don't think that, you know, we should necessarily use violence against him, but at the same time, you know, I don't hold it against the people, you know, for having the opinions that they have about him.
But he's one of many, most probably, that still might feel like that, even though he's retracted that statement now. I mean, we're coming to the end of our programme. Can I come to you, Mohammed, in terms of the way, from an impartial, you know, third-person point of view, I mean, is this a turning point of what we've been seeing in Egypt, and how social media is used? How do you think this is going to progress now? It was once seen as a tool to chat with friends. Now it can actually bring a government down to its knees.
Well, I'm watching very closely. I cannot really predict what's going to happen, but I'm watching via social networking. I don't want to discount them at all. I'll give them the credit. I'm following people from Twitter and Facebook, and following some of the ICFJ trainees who trained on social networking and citizen journalism, and using the skills they learned in our courses to bring the information more. And I don't want to give any idea how this, I think, gonna end, but I'm following on social networking and then another media what's going to happen.
We shall see how this does develop. I'd like to thank all of my guests in Washington, D.C., Courtney Rajan, Mohammed Al-Abdullah, Gillian York in Boston, and Omar Afendam in Doha. Thank you to all my guests on this edition of Inside Story, and thank you for watching. Do email us if you have anything to suggest for future editions at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Sahil Rahman. Thanks very much for your time and your company. Bye for now.
The times change. The instruments evolve. The battlegrounds shift.
This is America! Our country!
But the international struggle continues.
He was murdered!
Uncompromising, hard-hitting investigations.
I can't get no justice from no one in Jamaica.
People and power, at this time on Al Jazeera.
In a new series of one-hour documentaries, Al Jazeera English showcases films from across the Al Jazeera network.
We are now heading in towards Palestinian waters.
Two small boats set out from Greece to challenge the siege of Gaza. A dangerous act of defiance in the face of injustice.
They're only trying to scare us.
An extraordinary act of solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Al Jazeera World.
There is no one holding the crowd together. There is no one searching those who are there.
There are rocks being thrown left, right and centre. You don't know where they're coming from.
And I've already seen with my own eyes at least 15 people come pouring back from these clashes with bleeding heads and other injuries.
Well, I'm a few roads parallel to Tahrir Square, and it's just incredible scenes here.
As China undergoes profound changes, competition for jobs becomes a struggle to survive. Two graduates fresh out of college seek employment in a city of 8 million people. Now entering the real world, the graduates become increasingly desperate and begin to question their college-trained talents. It's a time of hope and frustration for the workforce of the future. Faces of China at this time on Al Jazeera.
Demonstrators remain defiant. Now worker walkouts contribute to the wave of discontent in Egypt. Hello, I'm Veronica Pedrosa, and you're watching Al Jazeera live from Doha. Also coming up, put him on trial now. Italian prosecutors call for immediate action against the Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi. Cuts versus spending. US President Obama grapples with the dilemma ahead of next week's budget. And the latest WikiLeaks release leads to speculation on the state of Saudi Arabia's oil reserves. A warm welcome to the program. It is 3 a.m. in Egypt, where protesters are camping out on the streets for the 7th day. But the fact that workers across the country are on strike may be a more worrying development for the Mubarak government. Behind-the-scenes negotiations are underway between a committee of wise men and the government to agree on a transition. Emike Umolu has the details.
Gamal, tell your father the Egyptian people don't like him. Words from a young protester who's helping to keep spirits up among anti-Mubarak crowds in Alexandria. Such scenes are now repeated daily in Egypt's second largest city. Like demonstrators in Cairo, these crowds are holding their ground. On Wednesday, their cause got an added boost. The Egyptian telecommunications building in downtown Cairo. About 200 workers demanding better pay and benefits. Thousands more across Egypt were holding similar strikes. Some say it's also in solidarity with those who want President Mubarak out.
Al-Mahalla Al-Kubra is considered to be a pivotal city for a change in Egypt. Our company is suffering losses, and it is also manipulated by a group of corrupt management. Meanwhile, we also support our fellow demonstrators in Tahrir Square for the change of the regime.
3 independent trade unions joined the day of mass action, also disrupting services in Suez and Port Said. This is a new dimension to the uprising. To lead a union in Egypt, you generally need government approval. The fact that these bodies now appear to be mobilizing against the state doesn't bode well. Right now, neither side in the crisis is wavering. Earlier on Wednesday, a group of prominent figures who call themselves the Wise Men met with Vice President Omar Suleiman to discuss a possible transfer of power, and like others before, didn't get very far.
The official position, be it from the Vice President or the Prime Minister's position, is that the President is going to remain in office until September, and that he continues to practice his authorities and that he is responsible for putting Egypt on democratic transition.
Not what people living in tent cities in Cairo and Alexandria want to hear. Emiko Molu, Al Jazeera.
Well, while Tahrir or Liberation Square remains the focal point of protests in Cairo, some pro-democracy demonstrators gathered in front of the country's parliament on Wednesday. Jackie Rowland was there.
The demonstrations are moving into a new phase. As you can see, the protesters are now venturing beyond Tahrir Square. Here they've come to the Parliament building, one of the symbols of power in President Mubarak's Egypt. There's a feeling that the politicians aren't listening to their message, so they've decided to bring the message to the politicians. The Parliament is packed full of members of President Mubarak's ruling National Democratic Party. The last elections were held in November and there were numerous complaints of electoral fraud. These people want the elections to be held again so that they can have a parliament that truly represents the people's wishes.
We are trying to move the demonstration to a new frontier. Now in Tahrir Square, they have already occupied Tahrir Square. Nobody can get them out from Tahrir Square. There is 2 ways to get them out from Tahrir Square. Either it's by listening to what they demands, or it's going to be a bloodbath.
The demonstration, as you can see, is quite well humoured, but